Rounder was started back in 1970, and we have done a wide range of music over the years, and still do. And Kenville and I were the founders, but the label we have a Nashville office now, and the A&R team, which includes the three of us, also includes people who are working there as well. And like most labels these days, we do a lot of we do our own marketing, publicity, and promotion in-house, but also work with a lot of outside independent promotion people and publicity, and we have our own publicists, but also work with independent publicists as well. The sort of, to just give a little perspective, record companies have changed a great deal in the time since we started in 1970 till now, and I'm sure we can all talk about that at greater detail, all of us.
Okay, Ty, would you tell us a little bit about
Crossroads?
Mm-hmm.
I work for a label called Crossroads Label Group, which started here in Asheville, I guess in the mid-'80s, as a studio called Hear Music, and on Marian Avenue, and since about maybe 15 years ago moved to Arden, North Carolina, out by the airport. And in Asheville, that long ago, the only kind of thing that was going on musically, the people that could afford to come and record, were Southern gospel artists, a lot of the traditional music from this area. So they started principally as a Southern gospel label long ago. About 15 years ago, Tim Surratt, which is a member of the bluegrass group Balsam Range, and some of the other original founders from the studio, started a label called Mountain Home Music, and they in turn signed a lot of bluegrass artists. So the last decade, they have been probably the leading Southern gospel label in the country, and in turn one of the bigger bluegrass labels. And we've recently, bluegrass-wise, some of the same folks that Rounder would be familiar with. Everybody from the Lonesome River Band to Balsam Range to the Grasskulls and some of those household bluegrass names. But we've also had in our camp over the years folks that have come from Warner Records and Warner Brothers, and come from Selecto Hits, and moved here from different parts of the country to be a part of our marketing, distribution, publishing, radio promotion team. And we've recently started doing more in the Americana and folk worlds. We've used all the same kind of connections and the same experiences and expertise that we've applied to the other genres to those genres. And some of the folk people we've recently been working with, Red June, which is, we had Kari do some radio promotion for a local group called Red June. Also, there's a Asheville-based band called the Honeycutters, who are on our label, becoming more of a national band, and we're in the process now of taking them from regional status to national status, using some of the same techniques and marketing processes. I've been there 11 years, and I'm the new guy. Mm-hmm. They've been there a long time, and so I think what you find is there's differences genre to genre, but the record label business principles and the landscapes are the same. The relationships are the same. It's just different little cliques of people that you end up working with. But so we are a locally based indie label that deals with about 25 national touring artists.
And thank you, Ty. And going back to the Rounders, can you give us a range of artists that you have on your label currently?
You want to do that one?
We've from the beginning we've had quite a range of artists. It's kind of amusing because people would meet us in different contexts. People would meet us and say, "Oh, you're Rounder, the bluegrass label." Some other people would say, "Oh, you're Rounder, the Cajun label," or some other form of music, and it was just because they came at us from that direction. But even though most of our grounding was really in bluegrass and old-time folk music, or old-time country music more so, from fairly early on, we did cover a wide spectrum of recordings, and we kind of categorized them in different numerical lineages to keep them separate in our own minds. Now we don't do that anymore. Now it's just, I guess at a certain point somebody told us, well, nobody else does that. Columbia Records just puts out records, they don't put them in different categories. We do have quite a range of artists that we work with now. Definitely still, I think many of you may know that we sold the company a few years ago to Concord Music Group, and I think a lot of people feared that we would, or they would, stop doing some of the musics that we had. Because of the sale, that didn't really happen. I think outside forces in the music industry overall have constrained many companies from being able to put out some of the things that we used to more easily put out. But we're still pretty much able to do a wide range of music. Thinking of some of the artists that we have, it's just going to be random people from this area. More recently, the Steep Canyon Rangers, who often work with Steve Martin, and Alison Krauss has been a long-standing, since she was 13 years old, artist on the label. J.D. McPherson he's from Oklahoma, but he's kind of a rockabilly performer, still kind of a country influence. Mary Chapin Carpenter is not that at all, but we have worked with her on her last several albums. Pick up some other names that I'm not.
Bella Fleck and Abigail Washburn, Della Mae,
The Gibson brothers.
Doug Seegers, Rush.
Yeah, there's somebody quite
So
different.
there's an example of the
pretty
breadth
broad
of
range,
folks. So hopefully,
Okay, so here I am, and I'm on this panel, and for right now I'm going to be a musician, and I have your attention, so here we go. So I just put out a new album. This is my hypothetical. I've just put out a new album, and people really love it. My audiences really love what I've done. I'm really excited about it. I've got, I play about 50 to 100 dates a year. I've got about 750 people on Facebook, and I have a mailing list, and I really just do great shows. So are you interested in perhaps signing me? How would you respond?
You just put out a record?
Yeah, you're singing duets on it, Bill.
No, I'm saying
And
you're coming to us as a
Nowlin.
record company, and you just put out a record instead of coming to us and saying, I'd like to make a record. So are you asking us to take over the album that you did, or work with you on your next album?
Well, I'm just going to come and say I've made a record. Would you be interested in signing me? So
what factors come into play in the decision of deciding to do that? It is more complicated today than it used to be back in 1970 when we started, or back in the time. I mean, things are always changing, and one of the things that of course has changed the most is now people can make records that are very good records on their own, that are really high quality, partly because of the lowered studio expenses these days, and that's a great thing. So therefore people can have more control over their own career, and that's a good thing. Record companies like that too, and it means that one can become one's own record company. And unless you're already at a point where a lot of the groundwork has been laid, that is probably the best way to do it, because that way, of course, there's a higher percentage that you will make from each one of those records. It's really, once you've already gotten to the level of playing, and it's not really number of shows, it's the caliber of shows and the booking agent that you have, the management that you have, and all of those things. It helps to have those in place, because a record company is more like a partner. And that would work best for the artist as well as the record company. It's not a big deal to be at a record company in many ways these days, because you can do so many more things yourself, and that's a good thing. That's a very good thing for you, and it's a good thing for the record companies. And it's complicated as to how things have gotten to that point, but that is the way it is, and so that's what we would say.
Ty?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked more people out of trying to get a record deal than I have into it, because it was well put. I mean, I think it's when it gets to the point where a good example is the group, the Honeycutters we recently started working with. It got to a point where the principal owner, a female lead person in that, needed a team of people to help her do all the things that she really either didn't have knowledge about how to do, publishing, royalties, getting stuff further than she can get it on her own. Because what record companies really offer, or anything else, is a team, marketing team in a lot of ways, but they offer relationships. People that have been in the business long enough, like all these folks have here, they've got relationships with distributors, they've got relationships with radio promoters, or they have in-house people that have relationships with DJs, for instance. But sometimes they have relationships with booking agents. They're able to fund certain things that people can't always fund on their own. Sometimes that involves studio and recording costs. Sometimes that involves putting on showcases at conventions, things like that. So it's when you get to that point where you've got an audience. The scenario you gave, I would say you don't need anybody yet. You can still handle, hopefully, what you're doing, because it's not like it's not like the movies. Record labels are not really like that. Like, they're not horror stories where you see where they're the big bad wolves and they ruin artists' careers and they can't be creative. That's not the way indie record labels work. Any record labels work in a way that we are an extension of your own efforts. Imagine you were your artist and you had to DIY everything yourself. And think of all the things that you do as an artist. Think of all the things you try to book yourself, try to figure out a way to record, figure out how to get into radio, figure out how to marketing yourself, social media, all those things. At least the way we run our company, that's what we offer as a team that helps aid in that. And you have to be at a certain level before you even need that, I think. Otherwise, you really are just sort of splitting the money with somebody else doing it, because there's not a lot of money in it.
I was going to say, the same way that Ty was just saying that record companies aren't like, the big bad wolves or whatever, that they sometimes, have
Maybe Sony and Warner.
Right, have functioned as being, but also they're not miracle workers either. So that is the reason why it's much more important, I think, to think of it as more of a partnership model, so.
Yeah, and we have often said the same kind of thing to an artist, is in effect, what do you think we really can do for you that you can't do for yourself? What's missing? Might you not be a lot better off doing it by yourself and keeping 100% of whatever benefits you get? Can we somehow bake a bigger pie so that your piece of it is bigger than if you had the whole smaller pie for yourself? Right. You did mention some points, though, talking about Facebook followers and the number of shows you do. Those are things that we will look at. And I think probably most companies would, to see, what does the artist bring to it? What are they doing for themselves? What have they already accomplished? What have they created as a foundation, and where do they think they're going? And then ask ourselves, can we help that, or are we going to take on something and end up disappointing everybody? Not just ourselves, but disappointing an artist that would sign with us.
I think it's important to mention in this regard that the band already had a top booking agent who had been working with them, who was enthusiastic about them, and that they had a touring base and a certain degree of fan base. So a certain amount of the work was done in contrast to your hypothetical situation where an artist was coming in just to put out the record on their own and hadn't done quite as much. So I think most record companies will look and see what are you bringing to us, and what can we provide for you, and looking at that and seeing if the fit is good. What does this artist need? Can we fulfill that? And what can we provide? And is that going to be enough to bring the artist to the next level and to a broader audience?
Let's double down on this just a little more economically. So, I mean, if I were my hypothetical artist, I would say, well, I just need some distribution. So I'd like to get to the realities of what would qualify me for distribution, what would qualify me in terms of numbers and economics for you to be looking more closely. For instance, when I remember back in the 70s and 80s, if you could sell 3,000 to 5,000 records, you were pretty happy, right?
Well, it depended on what you were spending on.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
If you were spending $30,000 and sold
would not be
3,000,
good.
you would not be very happy.
No.
If you were spending $2,000 and selling 3,000 copies, you might be happy.
Then you maybe could break even.
Yeah.
Right. But today, for your round, or for your label, for instance, what kind of sales are you looking for? And then Ty, I'm going to ask you the same thing. When you're signing an artist, what's the range of sales that you're looking for?
Well, I don't think that the answer to that, I mean, it depends in part on where the artist is in their career. And so you can't just say, I mean, there isn't a number that fits all artist situations. And in terms of what people are looking for in terms of a base that's already established, a lot of that, as we were saying before, has to do with the quality of the gigs that are being played. What the quality of, for example, some airplay, the quality of, say, YouTube views for that matter. There was an artist we signed as a new artist where the expectations are more modest in terms of sales, who already had 250,000 YouTube views for the song that was really the outstanding track on the record. It's now up to like about 1.5 million or something. And this is not someone who's a household name. It was just a great song, and that was already established. So those are the kinds of things, and when I say quality of gigs, for the most part, the sales will come from the audience that you're playing to when you're just starting out. There's no reason to get a record company involved in that for the most part. You can make more money doing that yourself, and it's a good thing. So it's really only when it gets to the distributors are interested when the numbers are going to start appealing to, for example, buyers of chain stores, the remaining stores that are left, that is, and that will appeal to Amazon and that have sufficient quality of media to, boost the Amazon buys on it. I mean, Amazon's our #1 customer as a record company. So it's a whole different ballgame, but the more that one achieves on one's own, then that's the groundwork that is really important.
No, I did give you a hard time about coming to us with a record that was already made. But in fact, I also mentioned J.D. McPherson recently, who we met with a record that he had already made. And in fact, it worked. We were able to help work with him to take
it to
his
another
artistry
level, to take it to
and
another
take it to
level.
another level, yes.
But that isn't the norm.
No.
Right.
No.
He had sold about 2,500 copies, and had done a certain amount of touring and had already had a number of reviews, and we were very concerned that the reviewers would say, this is an old record, we know that it's been out for a while, we won't pick it up. And the radio people had been playing and said, we've already played this, we're not going to play it. But in that case, there was one song that we really felt was going to get a lot of play at commercial radio. And our radio person thought that, and so we decided to take a shot on that. In contrast, when the bluegrass group Della Mae approached us and we had discussions, we decided not to pick up their first record, but to go and work with them and make the next record. And have worked with them on their second record with us came out this past Tuesday. So in that case, we felt that their record had already come out, that enough reviewers and radio people had already gotten it, and that we would have been hitting roadblocks if we tried to put it out as a new release.
Going back to budgets and number of albums sold, I think that's a really interesting point. Some artists do spend $30,000 on an album and sell 1,000 copies. And
they probably don't do another record for the label.
No, not for the label. I mean
Yeah.
independent.
Yeah, okay.
You mean on their own?
No.
They would
On
do
their
that.
own. So can you give us kind of when you're investing in an artist, just give us some example of if you spend this much money, this is what you would be looking for in sales?
I think Ty would be better to answer that because, of course, we aren't our own masters now. I mean, Concord really has a different kind of profit and loss kind of valuation than we do.
Well, maybe, I don't know if I would or not because we don't do it like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nuances to it all that are I mean, sure there's a bean counter sort of side to it. And if someone came to me and said, I just need distribution, I'd be like, distribution of what? There ain't no record stores anymore. Where you want to distribute it to, you can get it on iTunes and Amazon yourself. So, you know, there's different kinds of deals when you get into the specifics of a record contract. There's recording deals is what we call one, and that's when the record company might front the cost for the studios and a certain amount of marketing budget, and we're going to own the master of the album and distribute it to our people, you know, our distribution aggregators, and have them be out there selling it. Our marketing team's going to get behind and push it. We're going to get radio promotion. We might do something that involves iTunes to get you a top listing on, you know, iTunes country, you know, hot picks and stuff like that. And then, so we're going to put a little bit into it in hopes that it makes some money back. We've got to make some of that money back before we can pay you for the rest of it. If you do really well, you know, like, or you're really out there busting your butt, you're having success in radio, you're burning up the road, you're selling lots of artist copies everywhere you go, there's a big buzz about you, there's something for the PR agent to sink their teeth into, that maybe you're getting nominated for awards, you're getting #1 songs, those kind of things, you know, that helps progress the brand, which ultimately is the success of the artist with a sustainable career. There's other deals where you might bring us a finished product and we'll lease it from you. In other words, you own it, where we have decided to use our distribution connections to, you know, try to make a little bit of money on it. We're going to manufacture it and sell it back to you for $5. You go sell it for $15. I don't think there's ever been something where we looked and said, just based on how many records you may have sold in the past, that you're going to be valuable enough to us to for sure sign, you know. It's there's, like I said, it's a nuance. There's the potential you might be able to see in an artist. There's
But you're probably saying you never approached it as a straight business proposition. You have to be convinced of the artistry and
Sure.
like the artists
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Not just
we don't do it like that. I think that some of the horror stories you hear about, you know, record companies ruining artists, that's their approach. It's like oh, I'm gonna make some money on these people.
Yeah.
I can't imagine really doing business that way because the way the record business is these days, especially the different changes it's gone through, there's not a lot of ultimate money in it. You've got to like the artist you're working with. You've got to be a team together to promote the brand of the artist and look at 4, 5, 6 year plans. Hardly any new artists. It takes 3 albums to anybody make money because you've got to, especially a new artist, because you've got to build the brand of that artist. So I guess the answer is it's almost too nuanced to say that that there's a number or some kind of attractive figure that would have, you know, oh sure they're gonna do great, because there's no way to predict that, you know. Bands stay together, bands break up.
Don't we know?
Well, we actually, in most projects, we actually do the opposite, I think, where we do a hypothetical profit and loss statement, where we take a look at how many copies that we think we'll be able to place in stores, how many we're going to be able to sell in online, how many copies we think the artist is going to sell, and at the different prices, you know, multiply all those things out, take a look at what the budget for recording is going to be, what the photo, the front cover, the liner notes, and just put it all into a big thing, and then we come out with a number. It's certainly not scientific, but it's our best guess at what we're going to sell.
It's a projection,
Yeah.
and most companies use some sort of projection. It doesn't mean that you're going to come that close to it, and hopefully you'll exceed it, and sometimes you'll fall short of it, but, you know, just something to work with. But I think that that's about the closest.
And we used to have a guideline, kind of like $1 a unit.
But that's a
If
long
we
time
spent
ago.
$30,000
Right.
on something, we'd hope to sell 30,000 records. Actually, we'd make a whole lot of money if we sold
Yeah.
30,000 records. But the $30,000 on the recording budget doesn't cover all that other stuff, including overhead and so forth. Once you start having paid employees and salaries and have to pay rent and things like that.
Yeah, good, because I wanted to get some kind of a realistic estimate, because a lot of independent artists may spend 15, 20, 25,000 without doing any kind of cost projection for themselves. And so it is a good realistic thing for an independent artist to kind of understand how much they're spending and how much they think they're going to get from that and what elements it takes, which is where I want to go. And Marian, you started.
I have left out something that I think is increasingly important as we do this, and that's money from Sound Exchange. Are people familiar with Sound Exchange?
Is that SoundScan?
No, very different. Sound Exchange is money that comes, well, the U.S. government set up Sound Exchange, and in contrast to AM and FM radio that we're most used to, if if you were to guess on how much money Aretha Franklin got from her huge hit Respect when it got played on AM and FM radio, anybody just guessing? Huge record.
Nothing.
0.
That's right.
From radio.
Yeah, from radio. She obviously got money,
Royalties
from
from a record
playing and
company and so
whatever, but not for her performance. In contrast, if records are played on cable, Pandora, Spotify, there's a certain amount of money that comes in, and that can be quite considerable, and it's a major revenue stream. And we are, I think, all looking at that as a major source of income. And it's very nice because the money is split in three areas. One, half the money goes to the copyright owner, which can be the record label or can be the artist, depending. And then the other half is split up 45% to the artist and 5% to the other musicians and
The
singers
sidemen.
on the record. And we had one artist who has not recorded, I think, in 11 years, who has been earning $10,000 a year on her back catalog, and that's very nice money. And if you're looking at a record, it's a new record. It's very hard to tell how much radio is going to support it. In certain areas, when there's a strong XM, Sirius XM play, that can be a major source, but that's something we didn't really mention. And if we feel that the record is going to get a lot of play on Sirius XM, and sometimes we can look and see what they've done in the past, or ask them what they've done in the past, we'll get a better idea of how much more income, and that can be a major factor.
And it's called a digital airplay royalty
Right.
rate or royalty payment.
Did they pass that?
Yeah. It's
No, you're talking about something else.
Yeah.
The AM and FM, we have been working for years to try and get AM and FM to do that.
Yeah,
But
this
to
is-
rest-
But you're-
Strictly-
From what you said, the copyright owner actually gets half of what the artist gets, because the copyright owner's got to split with the publisher usually.
No, that's-
that's completely
They
That's
get
for
different.
the
paid separately.
song. This is for the performance.
it's for
This is for the performer.
it's for the
performance.
performance.
I
If you
understand,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. You're telling me that the performer is going to get more money. Oh, you're saying the copyright owner of the recording.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They also have to pay the publisher.
Okay, so how,
No,
I'm just, but that's not Sound
That's separate.
Exchange then you're
That's
saying?
separate. That is Sound Exchange.
Okay,
Sound
so
Exchange is for performance
That's my question, is
rights.
then what do what does the composer?
That is paid to, the songwriting royalties have been always paid, going back to the beginning of
Yeah, but
copyright.
they're minuscule on Pandora and stuff like that.
Yes, but
Yeah, so
that
is
is,
the artist getting more?
no,
than-
that's a completely
that's-
separate
Yeah.
thing
I
though.
was just, because he gave
Yes.
a ratio.
It
so I
is
was just
minuscule on
wondering.
Yeah.
Pandora and on Spotify, it's
Yeah.
quite a lot on Sirius XM. But the songwriter royalties are a completely separate thing, that is collected by BMI,
Yeah.
ASCAP, CSAC and so forth, so that is completely separate from performance
Using the
royalties.
copyright of the report.
Right,
not-
exactly.
Gotcha, okay, thank
yep.
Well,
you for
it's an
clarifying it.
it's an important thing to actually bring up because as independent artists, this is a source of revenue for you guys. If you have an
Yeah.
album out, if you are, doesn't matter who wrote the song, it doesn't even matter who really sang the, if you're playing on an album, it could be, if you're in a band, there's 5 members of the band, and you say, all right, we all own this album, we own the copyright to it, and we're the performers on it. You register this album with Sound Exchange, and they will pay you 10 cents, I think it is now, per spin, per song, per performer. So if you play banjo in your band's group, and you register as a 5th member of that group, and everybody in the band's registering this album with this song. I played the banjo on this song. Here's all 10 songs. If you're both the copyright owner, if you're an independent artist, you can claim to be the copyright owner. What we do with a lot of our contract is we become the copyright owner as a record label and give the artist performance royalty to the artist. So we're splitting that with them, which is usually a deal that we work out with the artist to say, well, you guys are pushing it in radio, you're going to give me that XM play, it's worth it to me to give you that percentage, so we split that with them. But if you're your own independent artist, you can register as a copyright owner, the performer, you can claim both sides of that. That's 10 cents per spin, and if you're, and we're fortunate in the bluegrass world, we have an XM station dedicated just to bluegrass music. But it says anything digital. This is your college stations that stream online. This is Pandora. This is, I think, SoundCloud now is starting to catch up with this. They're paying the streaming royalty rates. The streaming royalty rates per song add up to us as record companies. In fact, it keeps the lights on over at our place. But if you're an independent artist, I've got a little independent bluegrass band that plays on the weekends. We put our song CD out. We got on XM. We got checks for upwards of $800 a month each for about 6 months running. Almost paid for the album recording. So I think it's an important thing, maybe not related just to record company stuff, but as an independent artist, you guys need to go to soundexchange.com, figure that out, call them, register whatever you got, and they will pay. They'll pay retroly. They'll pay past stuff if you can go back and claim it.
Yeah.
And it's tracked by ISRC numbers. It's tracked, which are your digital codes in your songs. It's not by UPC. It's completely different than a copyright writer royalty,
And-
which is a publishing royalty, which goes to the writer.
And I
some-
think this person had his hand up
Yes.
first.
I just wanted to ask about, are you talking really about mechanical royalties?
No,
No.
So
We
that's
are-
a different thing.
we're
That's
talking
the
about
publishing,
performance
yeah.
royalties. Mechanical royalties are paid by the record companies.
I see.
The person or persons who wrote Respect have been getting money since the release of that.
That's songwriter
But
royalties.
the performer has not gotten money,
Right.
and that's what they changed with Sound Exchange. Is the performer and the people who performed on that recording are getting
And
money.
Just a
Yeah.
second. It's
Single
gonna be
performers.
Eric and then Damien.
Some of the questions have been answered, but I do want to just reinforce that if you're an artist without a label, sign up as a label too. You get twice the money. So
Yeah.
Right, you would be the copyright
Exactly.
owner, as in,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
claim
So
it.
I think a lot of
however you
artists
can.
don't do that. The other thing is it's free and it's easy and they're pretty helpful.
Yeah.
Their customer service on the phone and by email is helpful. So definitely do it. As far as they pay by the quarter. All of a sudden, I had money in my checking account. It was awesome, and
They're monthly now.
It was a little chunk, and then one time I got a big chunk, and I'm pretty sure it's because of
Retro,
retroaction.
yeah.
They went and found your old stuff
Yeah.
somehow,
Yeah.
they tracked it down. Sometimes they're slow about that.
So put
but
everything
we'll
in, and I did for artistic reasons. I made a lot of recordings and I sent them to radio. I didn't think I'd see any money, and then all of a sudden, it was a good chunk of money.
It's found
One time.
money, it's great.
Yeah, it was great. My question, I guess, would be has that, it could be also the explanation why I haven't gotten much since, although I've been getting the same kind of airplay, but I'm thinking it was just a retroactive thing. Has that been consistently, have you been consistently seeing money from them, or has it, I don't know, dried up, or are they not doing it in, doing
Well,
it
I think we're perhaps unusual in doing a lot of bluegrass.
And Sirius XM,
And Sirius
right.
XM is 24/7, and so they're doing lots and lots of back catalog.
Right.
So I think it's been much more consistent than some other forms of music where there isn't as heavy airplay, and
Right.
you'll get it when a record's new
Yeah.
and then have less airplay later on.
And I guess the final question, also related to that, was streaming. So when you may not get royalties for having it on FM radio, except that if that station actually streams, is that a pretty
Right.
good source of
Yeah.
it too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a bigger station, if you want to get on a bigger signal, and it's the streaming that you'll
Right.
see the money for.
You know, percentages are heavily weighted towards XM because XM sort of, their programming trickles down to a lot of other programming, like, I think, you know, music, it's the music online, the cable one.
Yeah.
Usually if you hear something in the airport,
Yeah.
it's coming from
Right.
XM programming,
Yeah, it's in my
which also
jam.
counts too, yeah. And yet Sound Exchange is very inconsistent.
It's
I mean, we see a lot of stuff, but we'll see things that have been out, that have been #1 singles on XM
Yeah.
for months and months and months, and all of a sudden they'll show up a year later.
Yeah, okay.
We found, anyway. We don't see more consistency.
But I think they are pretty good. But I may be wrong about this, but I also think that Sirius XM, in fact, someday may pay less because they were that was one of the conditions of their signing up, was that they were really charged way more than any of the streaming services, and certainly way more than Pandora, Spotify. So there are huge inequities in the way it's structured, and of course AM and FM terrestrial radio pays nothing still, and and whereas all of these others are paying, so it's hopefully there will be some consistency over the years, but terrestrial radio has always gotten away with being
There
exempt.
is a bill that's coming up right now in Congress to try to, once again, get a performance royalty for FM and AM. And I saw this morning that there were 50 members of the House who are not going to vote for it. They refer to that as a tax on radio, and saying that they are not going to support anything that is a tax
Which
on
it
a
isn't,
radio
it's for
station, which isn't,
performers,
yeah.
but that's just the broadcast industry speaking.
Yeah.
That's
Tax
their.
is a bad word.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
that, they know
exactly,
that, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So call your congressman, call and email and write your congressman.
Damien, do you have a question still?
I've been trying to start this internet radio station in the Washington DC area, and it's been very complicated, the technical end of it. But what concerns me the most is the royalty payment, and that's, since I'm a songwriter, or I identify myself as a songwriter, I'm sympathetic toward making sure they get paid, other songwriters get paid. And there are all kinds of schemes out there such as where you can stream and pay somebody to handle all that, administrate all that for you. But I'm not sure if, the problem is that a lot of the folks that I want to play are folks that may not be that well known, and they don't put all their metadata on the CDs, and I have to do a lot of typing in. I want to get all the performers in there, who owns the copyright, and a lot of that stuff just isn't available, and I have to do all this research. I hope that you guys start getting metadata filled out for radio.
Our stuff is all either on our stuff is
Embedded.
publishing information will always appear from where we are,
Yeah.
artists on the CD itself, and all the metadata, mainly, maybe what you're talking about is all gonna be embedded ISRC codes digitally embedded into the CD itself.
One of the reasons we
For
get so much
tracking
money
for that thing.
now is we started doing that about 20 years ago. And it's subsonic, you don't hear it, but it's in there. And as the disc is read, not only do we hear the audio, the way you can also see video on a DVD, but there's also this other information that is just picked up.
No, I've tried all these different programs recently software that's supposed to strip all that data off of the CD, and none of them strip. I don't try to get any big folks on there. I'm not interested in what you can already hear on the radio. And all these little guys, I don't find any of them have any metadata except for just the three basic things: the name of the singer, the name of the album, and the name of the title.
We should probably, if
That's what I
Folk
was gonna
Alliance
ask.
already does not do this, they should have them have a panel and maybe do a
Yeah.
white paper that would be on their website. And
What I was going to ask, I think what Damien's bringing up is a really great thing, and let's just take it back to you, the songwriter, so that you get some actual information on this. Are you all familiar with metadata? Are you all encoding? Does anyone have any questions about, because I was going to say if you could
There's
just
someone
take a
over here.
couple,
Yes.
yes, but just 1 second, I was going to say if we could just take a couple of seconds first and just talk about when you have your recording and your masters, what do you do to encode?
It's done in mastering.
And
What do we do is what does one do?
what does one do? What should one do?
Um,
And at what stage?
the easiest way to get an ISRC code, for instance, outside of having, a mastering company do it, is you can go through CD Baby. They actually will provide ISRC codes for you. That's like the quickest DIY thing to do.
That's what most of you probably do.
If you're familiar with this at all, you probably dealt with, because they require it pretty much. They say, when you sign up for CD Baby, they'll say, do you have this or not?
And then how about getting all the, loading into Grace Notes, getting all the information that you're looking for?
Is the IRCC that little scrambled eggs postage stamp looking thing that you can scan with your...
No, it's like a UPC code that's digitally embedded as
Yeah.
per song, on each song.
Oh.
So,
It's like
for instance, if you're getting a song played on XM, how does XM know how to pay the sound exchange royalty for that? Each song has to have its own code.
Right.
And so CD Baby does provide that for artists.
They don't look it up the way you're talking about. It's just read by their.
For
Computer.
MP3 streaming like iTunes and all, they seem to use what's called something like ID3 V2, which seems to be a whole different scheme that it's supposed to be programmed into it, and you can do it yourself. Anybody can do it with the right software. But I don't think it's the same as IRCC.
One of the problems, Eric does it and I do it too, we do acoustic music radio promotion to the folk DJ list. And I get a lot of artists that come to me with a finished record. I'm sending it out, and then I get a DJ that says, I can't get any information, or can you load this into Grace Notes? So it's important that when you're recording, that all that information comes up when it's put into iTunes or into your CD, and the DJs are looking for something like that, and that would be relevant. We have a half hour, and so we're going to go back to you, and I want you to take advantage of having this expertise.
So what drives record sales? And is this sound exchange become one of the major revenue streams besides sales for a record label?
Well, answer that one, yes. You can
Okay,
deal with that.
so now it's not just sales, you have to get several different, so what
Well,
would
it's,
you- how do you
sales are still
identify-
important.
How would you identify what the different sections of revenue streams are and what drives them? How does an artist or a record company?
Well, that probably hasn't
Trigger
changed
those.
all that much. The distribution has changed, as we've discussed.
Uh-huh.
Still, touring is very important, and selling at your shows. Radio is still important in terms of publicizing the act, so more people will come to your shows, and you'll be able to sell more records. If there's publishing involved with the songs, if they're played on the radio, that's a revenue stream.
I mean, many of our artists, in fact, do a preponderance of older songs.
The
But
Grammy
it doesn't
winner in
matter,
the
yeah.
the Grammy winner in the bluegrass this last year was a group called the Earls of Leicester, and they did all covers of Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs tunes. No new songs, no songs that were done by Flatt and Scruggs that did not have the dobro. So it's a very
That's what
finite
I'm saying,
thing.
when you're
But-
doing old stuff, what drives?
That's
Well,
what
in
they
that
wanted.
case, it
That's
was-
what they wanted to do.
It was they wanted to do this, and it was
Right.
performance. It was an excellent performance of those songs, and they were songs that may not have been better performed than the classics, but they were very well done, and they had very high sound quality, which the original recordings done in 1954, 1955, so they got a lot of play, but they probably were the best versions of those songs since the originals.
But that's not a very good example,
Yeah.
because they are a group that only does Flat and Scruggs
Well,
songs
they're
of a
all
very
different-
certain period.
What's the strategy?
And most people don't really, I think, have a strategy. They do what they really love and what seems to work best with their audiences.
And you never know, because
You're
tastes
saying you
change.
don't know any better than.
I mean, nobody ever would have guessed that Man of Constant Sorrow from the Oh Brother film would have sold 7 million copies. It's just,
So you never know.
Why
But
don't
I think
we-
Lydia was next.
No,
Thank you
there's
very
someone on the floor
Yeah.
over here that had
Oh.
their hand raised,
Right.
so.
Hi, I'm
Oh.
Lorraine. This goes back to the previous discussion about the metadata. Is there a quick list of what metadata you would generally include, or somewhere that's easy to look up online? If you did a search for metadata on CDs, are you gonna get 50 million answers that you don't have to spend time telling us now?
You can answer that, Karen.
Oh, no, I can't.
but I think Ken had the best ideas.
Which is it's done in
This
mastering.
isn't it's usually done in mastering, but this isn't readily available to a lot of people, and I think it would be a good thing if,
If Focal Lines
If
had
it-
a white paper
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Well, consider that looked up, and Angus is gonna be here tomorrow,
Yeah.
so.
Okay,
we'll
good.
talk about
I
it.
think I've done this. If you go, I think it's isrc.com
Yeah,
or something. So if you Google it, it'll be the first thing that comes up. It's a one-time cost, and then you get like 10,000 codes. So I did it on my own for $70, and I can do it for now till
So is the
forever.
ISRC code, is that basically a compilation of the data put into one code?
No, that
It's-
you
it's
still.
just a
It's like a
number.
UPC code, a digital UPC
Yeah,
code.
it's like
It's like
three
you would see on
letters,
the back of
three
an
numbers.
email.
But it-
Plus
but
per
the
song.
UPC
Yeah.
The way a UPC code connects to other data, is that
It's connected to
It does.
per
It's a
song,
unique
Yeah.
code
each song.
for each song.
One
Okay.
code for each song.
I
I
found
think
a-
that covers.
I found an excellent definition if you want me to read it. It says ISRC codes, International Standard Recording Code, are assigned to songs and encoded onto a CD for tracking purposes, royalties, etc. They're encoded into the TOC section of the CD, the table of contents. They're not embedded into the individual song files. So if you upload your songs to a music service from the CD, the ISRC codes are not included in the upload. Whereas with ID3 V2, one of the new formats, it is included for each individual title. Anything you want to know, you can put as much or as little information you want. You can say this songwriter has a dog. No, it has 2 dogs. Whatever. Anything you want to put into that ID3 V2 code can go in there.
And then
It
also
simplifies
loading
it.
into
an
Grace
expansion.
Notes.
It's,
What, you can just put it into your computer, it will come up in iTunes, and then you can make sure the information is in for radio. And we will bring this up with Angus, so thank
Yeah,
you
let's
for
get
all
back
of
to
this
that, yeah.
information. Lydia, and then we'll go back to you, sir, okay?
Is there somebody at the label whose job it is to talk about artistic direction? Or is that not done at all? Is that totally up to the artist?
I think that depends really on the label and where the artist is. I think there are some artists who have a lot of direction early on and then develop to the point that there's a smaller discussion. There are some artists who will come to us who are very far along and it becomes a short discussion on we're doing this. So it really varies.
I'm
I think
just guessing though,
it's available. I think most labels that have a staff will have somebody who is available. And I think it's a very good question because a lot of people will record a record and then send it and will say, oh, you know, these three or four songs, this is a really good direction, but
Yeah.
they've recorded 12 and it's sort of a difficult time. So it might be good to, you know, if you're looking for a label, to have a few things done and then approach and then have that discussion.
Yeah. Do you understand, because I think that that's important. In other words, you can for a label that actually does that, and not all of them do, will give feedback usually about things that they feel are stronger than others.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is common sense, right? You come to a label with a certain thing,
Mhm.
within reason, you want to stay with that. If an artist is going to go totally off the wall, whatever your actual job is, you're going to notice and be like, hey, you can't do that.
Well, the label will say, that the last question that we traditionally have when we're discussing an artist is, how can we win with this project, or how can we win with this artist? And that basically means, what do we see a route to success? Does this mean that the artist is touring 200 dates a year, which occasionally
Obviously
happens?
helps, yeah.
Is there a song like the record we discussed before, where there's a song or two that we feel is so radio ready that we feel confident that it will get lots of airplay, which will then lead to the airplay will lead to more touring, more people coming, and greater success down the road. Whatever it is, there are lots of projects that come in which we think are extremely well done, where people are talented, and either the record seems fragmented, or it doesn't hold together, or it might be great, but there's been no thought about how to sell it. Does it have is there a radio format that will play this record? Are there venues that want to have this type of artist or this type of group playing there? It's very difficult and very frustrating often to have a completed record, as I said, that's really well done, and that we and many times other people just throw their hands up.
Does that answer your question at all?
Well, I think it went on a different subject, but it's still interesting.
Yeah, okay.
Well, just to go back to both.
But let's try to get her.
No,
The question was
there's not every label has a person whose job is to.
Right.
No, labels are very different, and they, we have two labels here, and we have different ways of doing certain things. So the answer is, you need to really check around. And
It would tend to be an extravagance to have somebody that just did that.
Yeah.
It would tend to be an A&R person that personally got very interested in this group, and maybe took a little exceptional interest.
Do you want to describe A&R?
Well, A&R does.
Artists and repertoire,
Yeah.
but it's the person that would maybe be signing an artist. They'd be out there looking, talent scouting, so to speak, finding artists that they wanted, they thought might be good. And sometimes that can be kind of routine if you do a lot of records, but usually there's some interest, something that grabs you about a particular record, or else you're going to just move on to some other project. So you may or may not get more or less engaged with the person in question. It's just also an interpersonal dynamic. You might hit it off with somebody, and therefore you really get into, how can we make this record
But
better?
it also can get into who, if it's a solo artist, who would be good musicians to play with that person, who might be good singers, a good engineer, good studio, direction of the music. I mean, it can be a very, very
Ken has
broad
often
range.
helped artists pick songs to record.
That's what
Very
I'm
often.
hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for organic, like for the, we have the sort of the trifecta at our place. There's gospel, bluegrass, and then this Americana thing. For organic, which is Americana, like, I'm an A&R person for all the artists on there. And some of them are very clear in their vision. They'd even know what they want on their album cover. They know what order they want their songs in. They know how they want a certain recording to sound. And there's some that we literally have to have a lot of lunch meetings and become an armchair psychologist and walk them through everything from, I don't know what I want on my album cover. Does this song sound good? Do you guys like this? I don't know.
Who am I?
Who am I?
What about the artists?
That's the
What about the artists that
psychologist.
know what they want on the record company, but they're wrong?
There's nothing worse than an artist with an identity crisis, and by that I mean there's nothing worse than a bluegrass-y sort of artist that wants to do 3 bluegrass songs and 3 songs that are guitar and drum heavy.
Right.
What, am I gonna send this to Bluegrass Radio, and they're gonna listen to half of it and think this isn't really a bluegrass artist and throw it out. So, yeah.
John?
A change of subject, have you all discussed the future of the CD format?
Grim.
Yes, and we're going to have a workshop on, also with Steve Johnson from Merlefest, which will be the state of music in the future, but we did not discuss that
Does
today.
Steve know what it is?
I would like to know what he's planning on talking about.
Yeah, I want to question that.
Do you want to comment on how?
It depends on the genre, though, in fact, in
Yes.
part.
Yeah. It does.
Because even though we have some, to use bluegrass, since that's what we were talking about right now, or Ty was talking about before. Bluegrass is a simpler one in some ways, because a lot of more traditional bluegrass artists, no question that the majority of their records are still bought in, in CD form. Yet there are some particular bluegrass artists, like for example the Steel Drivers. Most of theirs are digital, so it depends. I think there are a lot of, I would guess, folk fans. We were talking about this just in relation to folk DJs who still like to get hard copy. The same is true in the bluegrass world. It's changing, and it will continue to change, particularly I think in terms of servicing DJs, because it's silly to have to make all of these actual physical things and send it to people when it's easier to get it to them just in a digital format. But there are still a lot of people, and I even find that this is true of younger people, not just older people, who still like to have something that has the whole thing there. And sometimes will have a digital copy, but also want to have a physical copy. So, I think that it's very mixed. I mean, the majority of things are still, of course, sold on
Is
CD.
the emergence of vinyl a factor for you all?
A small percentage, and a lot of artists, if they have a fan base that really likes vinyl, and that is, a lot of younger artists, I guess.
It's typically 500 or 1,000 copies, kind of a limited edition that's made, but it's significant enough to do.
It depends on the genre, really, and I don't think it's big in folk or bluegrass.
And Southern Gospel, they're still looking for the cassette tapes.
So you see, there's a lot of variety.
But one of the big questions about the future of the CD, how many people have been at a record store in the last 6 months, or even know where one is?
I think what a CD is anymore is it is a memento. It's like it's a keepsake. It's a take home. It's like a T-shirt or something else.
Also,
But
like being, more connected to the artist itself, is like having that physical.
It's a souvenir.
You know what I mean? Like
It's a souvenir of a show usually. If you go to the show, you buy them on shows.
I think it's a souvenir of a show, but I also do think that there's still, and it's surprising to me, but I think there are still younger people who also have a kind of collector's impulse.
Also
Which is
older
one of the
people.
reasons
Sure.
that,
Older people,
well,
sure.
that goes without saying, everybody knows that about old people, but I think that it's surprising that even younger people do seem to have a collecting impulse too.
Well, but because of the record stores going away, the
Right.
place they can go collect it usually is at a show or.
Yes.
John, I wanted to say,
Yeah.
when we're doing our
Yeah.
projections, for an artist we've worked with before, or where we see what they've sold before, we usually start with guessing that we're going to sell at least a third less than the last record.
Isn't that a fun thought? That's the future of the record business.
Well, and there's another factor too, which I've been reading about, is because of streaming, all of that has gone down. Now, streaming is beginning to go down,
Yeah.
but until recently, it's really cut into a lot of album sales or even digital downloads. But for the folk format, the record is still dominant. And I was telling the Rounders a story where I try to cut down my radio list because I send to a lot of DJs, and one DJ was completely adamant that he just wanted digital. He didn't want to get all those packages. And we'd like to cut down because it's expensive to mail a package. And I noticed for 1 year this DJ didn't play anything I sent. And I emailed him and I said, I've had a lot of number 1, 2, 3s, 4s, and 5s. And so I'm just wondering, is digital an issue for you? And he sheepishly wrote back and said, yes, I really wanted everything on digital, but I just can't download all of this, so I do still want the CD. So just for the people in this room that are in that kind of format, or the bluegrass format, you've got a while on CDs. And let's get two people in the back and we can come back, okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
To the
Oh, no, I was just raising my hand when you asked about who had
Been to a record store.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, okay. Lyle?
Yeah, so I was just kind of curious on the tangent of streaming. Like, what's the role of distribution these days? Is it still important to have physical distribution? I know they also do stuff with digital, but is there more stuff going on with distribution than just farming it out to streaming services like something similar to what TuneCore does?
Do you
Like
mean
guys-
distribution as in sales, or do you mean distribution to radio stations?
I mean distribution like out to
Yeah,
out to stores. And
that's
out
what I
to-
thought you meant.
Like, do you guys work with somebody at iTunes or Spotify to get featured in the playlist or featured on it?
We have a person who's in charge, a sales manager who deals with them directly for positioning and stuff like that, just like in the old days with record stores.
Okay.
And it is true that still, I mean, as I mentioned before, I think Amazon is our #1 customer. You know, they still sell physical copies too. So, I mean, yes, is the answer, and we're distributed through Universal and have been for about 10 to 15 years now. But before that, we were with a system of independent distributors. Of course, it was very different back in those days. There were record stores, but even now, aside from the record stores, you know, even you need to have someone who's going to be dealing directly with Amazon and so forth.
So in terms of using like independent people, would it be beneficial to seek out a distributor rather than just going through CD Baby or TuneCore to get that personal relationship to maybe get featured in a store?
The more relationships, the better.
Yeah.
I mean, there are salespeople will talk to people at Yahoo, talk to people at Amazon and so forth, and they will talk about placement. You know, will you feature this in your top 5 or your top 10? And will you do it for a few weeks? That type of thing. And they do develop relationships that way, which is a hard thing for somebody to do if
Just
you're
by
just on
yourself,
your own,
yeah.
because the people only have limited time to talk to.
Yeah, those relationships are the part of the advantage of working with a record company. I mean, you can't call up a distributor and say, I'm Joe Tempeg out here in North Carolina, I need you to put my stuff on the top shelf on iTunes, they're not gonna listen to you.
Although sometimes you can if it's like a regional thing and there's a buzz about it.
Right,
You know,
you can't- yeah,
remember
if you-
that from the, you know.
Sure,
that's
if you
right.
can,
And where would they find that
downside.
person? How would they find a person who does that kind of work, placement work?
Well, I think we were just talking about distribution, actually. So, I mean, you know, there are
Through
lists of
a distributor?
Yeah, yeah. Someone who services stores,
Somebody that's a professional
yeah.
Who do that?
sales manager. Or,
Yeah.
Would do the digital side as
yeah,
well?
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And if you need a name of a distributor that does that?
So this might be an obvious question. I'm kind of formulating it as I say it. You know, the little I know about Spotify in particular, I've heard from a lot of artists that don't have a very big fan base, that monetarily there's not really much of a benefit for them to be getting on there. Would you say from a promotional standpoint it's still worthwhile, even though the money isn't really there to be putting it out there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Any way of reaching more people is a good way.
Sure.
I don't know if even big artists get much money from them.
No,
Yeah,
it's-
Taylor
yeah.
Swift is off Spotify for that reason.
well, and she can afford to,
Yes,
but
yeah.
most
She
people
doesn't need
can
it.
use that.
And right, there's
exposure.
There's the new
Yeah, it's
the new
exposure
one
too.
that's owned by Jay-Z and Beyonce. They're offering lossless recordings and so.
But what Marian is saying is so true. It's like, as an independent artist, you don't want to leave, and what Ken said, you don't want to leave any money on the table. Because I've had artists come to me and say, I'm not going to sign up for BMI or ASCAP because the people have said that there's no money around for it. And I'm like having a fit going, you sign up for everything. So you sign up and don't worry that it's not enough money, but there will be checks coming your way, and if it's $50 or $100, you don't want to leave that money on the table.
And most likely the day will come that they'll actually have to, that their rates will be higher too.
Yeah,
Someday Sirius XM will probably be lower, some of these others will be higher, some of them won't even be around anymore, but at some point there will be probably an evening out. And hopefully terrestrial radio
Hi,
too.
and then you-
Again, relationships is a really key thing there. I mean, we have hired people that have that specialty as background, and they know people in all the major studios or advertising agencies, and those are the people that they interact with all the time. They get to know their tastes, what might interest them. They'll hear that there's a new show that's coming out that's NCIS New Orleans. It's going to feature music from New Orleans, naturally. And they'll know, oh, well, we've got a lot of New Orleans music. Let me get you a package. And they'll just have that dialogue, which is impossible, again, to kind of just call up a, hi, is this CBS? Can I talk to somebody that does your music stuff? Because each show has their own music producer anyhow.
I think, we have five people at Concord that are doing that full time. It really depends on the type of label, the type of music. It's less likely to have somebody. I mean, we do get some bluegrass placements, we do get some folk, but it tends to be more rock, or occasionally if there's something that's at New Orleans or jazz or blues or Cajun or Zydeco. So it really depends on the label and your type of music as to whether it's placeable. If there's it could be great music, but there just doesn't, it has to be the right kind of show, somebody who's aware and likes that kind of music, or is aware or likes your kind of music. Increasingly, there have been people who work for the shows who try to find unknown artists and sort of build their own stars, which is really neat. Frustrating for us sometimes, but it's really neat for the artists when they do find somebody new and can get them into a movie and make them into a star.
The payoff of it can be huge.
Yeah.
I mean, minimum maybe $3,000 or $4,000, but into the tens of thousands. And we had one song in a beer commercial that took in over $1 million over a period of 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
I think there are also different ways that labels work. There are some labels who will only or largely take finished masters, not pay for them, but then provide services. There are labels that charge and don't charge very much for the artist, and then there are labels that provide some services and charge a certain amount of money, and then there are other labels that provide more services and charge for them. So it's, I think you often get what you're paying for. So you do your typical 2-column thing. This is what I'm getting, this is what I'm paying, does this make sense? And when you can compare different labels and what they provide and what you pay.
Ty, did you have any further thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Is it maybe different for you? Yeah.
No, that's well put. I guess it's one of those things too. It's a little bit nuanced in that it's not just industry standard. Probably now is record labels sell to artists physical product for about $5. You sell it for whatever you want, But so it's not just about splitting $15 or $20. It's how much would you pay to have a radio promoter promoting it to radio so you get the benefit of that airplay? And what does that mean, that benefit? Does the label have an in-house person that's just on salary, so you're not really paying an outside promoter? Do they have a marketing team that's meeting a certain amount per hours to put forth everything from providing PR people with fodder to go out and tell the world, wave the flag for you to who you are? That's the kind of stuff that, unless you're going to pay for a PR person, which is X amount of dollars a month for a retainer, that's a cost to you too. So it's kind of like, what does each label necessarily provide? In-house people to do all those things you'd otherwise be paying for yourself in exchange for half your copyright, part of your sales, percentage of your digital sales. That's kind of what it comes down to, at least the way we kind of operate.
If anyone goes so far as merch into that sort of territory.
With some artists, actually, we have started doing some merch stuff too. Yeah, we've actually handled everything from online orders to working with them at table sales. as well as fan sourcing. We actually do fan sourcing stuff. We built our own fan sourcing program.
And sometimes websites, and there are all kinds of
Yeah, we do. Our
things that
website
get
for our artists, we
involved,
provide those. Social media things. It can be a whole, so like we were kind of saying in the beginning, a label, especially in the independent world, can basically be just a bigger team or extension of what you would normally be doing yourself.
Crossroads is exceptional, I mean, in the way they offer service for the size label, and of course, what the Rounders do. And some labels offer none of that. So there's all kinds of deals.
The ways that different labels and different A&R people will even look at something, it ends up, do we see that route to success? So if we occasionally see somebody with overwhelming talent and we feel that we can find a manager or a booking agent, that's a possibility, but it's much more likely that we'll look at somebody more seriously if they've accomplished more. A manager friend of mine used to say that he would only take on artists for management if they were going to succeed whether he was involved or not. Meaning that they had the talent, the drive, the commitment, all of what was there, and then he felt he could help them avoid potholes, roadblocks, other things. He could sort of steer them around and move things more quickly. But he really wanted to see that the artist was serious and had the basics.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for this really esteemed panel. Hi, Gilpin, Nowlin, Marian, Levy, and Ken Irwin.